Hi, Kings Mountain. We're back again with updates with the city manager. I'm your city manager, Jim Palahniuk. Today's theme is going to be exclusively about the city's sign ordinance. Now, the sign ordinance is that section of our Unified Development Ordinance, or UDO, that deals exclusively with the regulations on signs. So obviously businesses throughout our community, they rely on signage so that people know where they are, what they sell, etc. But there are restrictions and regulations that get attached to where those signs can be, how large they are, etc. And this year, we recognize that effective July 1, our UDO called for very new standards to kick in, to go into place for our signage. But what that was going to do is, if we did nothing about it, make a whole series of signs throughout our community no longer in compliance. So we recognize that that probably was going to be unenforceable in many ways, and it was going to be a little bit too onerous. So what happened was that the Planning and Zoning Board, as well as the City Council, determined that it was appropriate to put into effect a moratorium so that we had some additional time to determine just how we would bring some of these signs that were non-compliant into compliance and into ultimate enforcement in the future. And recognizing as well that there were some problems with our existing sign ordinance that we would have to change. So that whole process now has been ongoing. Now, if I could, I'd like to introduce to you all the city's planning director, Mr. Henry Earle. Henry is our planning director. He's been with the city now for about three months. Mm-hmm. He came to us from Cleveland County, where he had been their assistant planning director for quite a number of years. Yes, sir. So he has a great deal of background and experience in this area. So we're going to let Henry kind of give you the background on this and tell you a little bit more about it.
Great. Thank you, Jim.
You bet.
So when it comes to our sign ordinance, one thing that happened when I was hired is I was asked to come in and look at our sign ordinance and make it something that could be a little more practical, a little more enforceable. And as Jim mentioned, on July 1st, there were some rules that were going to come into play that it was something that the city was not prepared to enforce. And so one of my first tasks here was to take a look at our sign ordinance and really get into the meat of it. And as I stated, try to come up with something that was practical and enforceable. And this is not something that the city wants to do lightly, nor is this something that we want to do too quickly. We wanted to take our time on this. And so, as Jim had mentioned, the City Council put a 120-day moratorium on the enforcement of our sign ordinance so that it would give both the planning office and the planning board time to work through our sign ordinance. And our sign ordinance is pretty large. Right now, it's about a 30-page document, which if you are a business owner and you are looking to try to determine what kind of sign you can put up and what kind of regulations are, that can be overwhelming. And so one of the things that we really wanted to do was to whittle that down, get rid of a lot of the superfluous language, and to make it something that is easy to find what you're looking for and easy to find what these regulations are that would apply to you and your business.
So Henry, you've been working on this for some time, obviously, and you've also been working through it with the planning board. What are some of the things that you determine were a problem with the existing sign ordinance, and kind of where you hope to go in the future with it, and what will people expect when they see this new ordinance and how it will impact them? Give us a little more of an understanding of some of that, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. Great questions. So one of the things that I am tasked with as a planning director is that I need to look towards the future. And I need to be thinking not just what's going to happen over the next month or the next year. I need to be looking 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the line. I need to be looking past my time working here. And one thing I wanted to do with this sign ordinance is make sure that we were thinking about how will this city look in 30 years? What do we want the signs to look like in 30 years when people are driving down the street, when people are coming into Kings Mountain the first time? What do we want them to see? How do we want that to look? And one of the items that was brought to our attention early on was that our UDO said non-conforming signs had to come into conformance and by July 1st of this year. And this is one of the items that we wanted to take very seriously with this revision to our UDO. We wanted to make sure that the rules moving forward about non-conforming signs, that they're very clear, they're very concise, and that business owners know when it is that they have to come into conformity and know what those rules are going to be to enable them to have a sign that will be conforming.
So Henry, I've got to ask you, we've really seen this big change in the way that business is conducted in the last decade or so. And so much in the past, signage was important because someone would literally drive by to determine where something existed. Now we all seem to buy things because we find it on our phone, we find it online, and then if anything we order it, or maybe we go to pick it up. But signage in identifying where something is and actually seeing it as you drive by is not nearly so as important. So I'm guessing that really comes into effect now as you start thinking about the future and what signage is necessary, how big it is, where it gets placed. Is that correct?
Absolutely, that's correct. And you bring up a good point. Years ago, if you were going to find somewhere to buy an item, you had to look for that sign, and you were driving down the road looking at a map, and you wanted to see that sign coming from a distance. But now, as you said, we buy a lot of our products online, but even when we go to the store, we have our GPS that tells us exactly where we're going. It's not as critical for businesses to have a large sign that is well lit, that you can see from a mile off. And one of the things that we want to really look at in our sign ordinance is how do we want to gear our signs, keeping that in mind that it's not as necessary for them to be so visible from so far away. We want to make these signs more attractive, maybe a little lower to the ground, so that when you're driving down the road, it's a more pleasant experience all the way around.
So Henry, this process is starting to come to an end. What can the public expect as to, can they still provide input, and if so, where? And what is the timing on how this gets approved in the future?
Absolutely. We certainly want people to feel included in this process, and we want to make sure that they have a voice. And so one of the things that I'm doing is next Thursday on September 5th, I will be at the Patrick Senior Center at 2 o'clock, and I will be giving highlights about the sign ordinance, and we'll take questions from the public as well. And also that day from 5:30 to 7, I'll be doing it again. So either one of those opportunities, I'll be there, and I'll be there to answer questions, give people information, and hopefully get some input from the public as well. Great.
But now if they can't actually attend that, can they simply maybe email you, call you? Is that okay? And how would they do that?
Absolutely. Our office is open. You know, we are an 8 to 5 Monday through Friday office, but you can always call, leave me a message. You can email our office. Absolutely. I am more than willing to take any suggestions that people have and consider them. So please feel free to reach out to our office with anything you have.
Great. And then ultimately, when will Planning Board and then City Council take up this issue?
So Planning Board is going to give their final recommendation to the City Council at their meeting on October 1st. And then on October the 10th, at the work session, the City Council will hear that and will make a decision, because that will be at the end of the moratorium.
Great. So obviously, if signs are important to you, if you're a business in the community, you're a resident, and this is an important issue, please, there's still time, obviously,
Absolutely.
to provide input on this. And obviously, they also can come to these meetings
Of course.
and express thoughts there as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. So again, we look forward to any and all input on this issue, and we will be seeing you again with updates with the city manager. Until that time, I've been your city manager, Jim Palahniuk. See you, Kings Mountain.